Welcome to the VTTDM channel. I am JW, the VTTDM, and today we're going to talk about the rule of cool and cinematic action. Now, there's no one defined rule of cool. Here's the rather vague definition from Google's AI. In Dungeons & Dragons, the rule of cool is an unofficial guideline where a dungeon master, DM, may bend or even ignore the strict rules of the game to allow a player to perform a particularly cool or exciting action, even if it technically wouldn't be possible according to the written rules, prioritizing the fun and excitement of the moment over strict adherence to mechanics. Essentially, if a player wants to do something that sounds awesome, the DM might let them try it, even if it means bending the rules a bit. But like I said, different DMs and different tables adopt different ways of doing things. One version I've heard about a lot is that if someone rolls a hit in combat, they can describe any level of absolutely batshit nut shenanigans for how they made that hit. For example, a fighter on a balcony just rolled a 19 against a dragon that, while standing on the floor below, has enough body exposed to the floor above to be in melee range of the fighter. The player now describes jumping to the chandelier, striking the dragon's back while he swings away from the balcony, then jumps back onto the balcony on the swing back. This can be fun and all, but something that over the top that requires multiple skills to accomplish isn't my cup of tea. I do like having a rule of cool, but if anyone can convince me that a dex, athletics, or acrobatics check isn't needed to grab that chandelier, then I'm a monkey. In this version of the rule of cool, a maneuver this cool is being created after the fact of the hit. Would the player have described all of this if they missed the roll? Now, I know, in a lot of rules of cool, the shenanigans are described before the attack. But either way, unless the DM calls for that skill check, there was no risk. Now, I am in favor of stuff that's low risk being described before or after a hit. Maybe you do a quick non-maneuver flourish with your sword or cut the letter Z into the monster's chest. Good on you! That's interesting. I'll probably give you inspiration for that. And of course, I love when players do things out of the box. Like, one player I had was a Goliath barbarian, and when an intellect devourer suddenly showed up in melee range, the barbarian immediately picked it up and threw it against the stone wall. I enjoyed that. Maybe not the best move for the barbarian, but it was in character. Sadly, another devourer ate his brain. Now, the rule of cool I like best is a variant on what's called cinematic advantage. Cinematic advantage is sometimes used as a substitute for flanking, but for me, those two mechanics are very different mechanics, and they're not mutually exclusive. Cinematic advantage, it trades advantage on the next attack roll for the player actually doing a skill check, usually with a generous DC. But many of my players have high enough to hit bonuses that making any skill check at all for advantage just isn't worth the risk mathematically. Which is why I now intend to use cinematic action. I call it that because advantage isn't the only currency I can trade with. It can cover several things beyond what the rule of cool usually covers, but we'll get to that. The short version of what cinematic action is characters doing crazy-ass things in combat, but the players are ready and willing to run skills because that's actually part of the fun. You're trying to set up a cool action that you might see in a movie, but also enjoying when things don't work out. Indiana Jones didn't always succeed at what we could call skill checks, but we enjoy whether he does or doesn't. And the players agreeing to take these risks should have their characters rewarded both in success and failure, and to be on board with the fun of a failure. Let me give you an example that actually happened in a game of mine. We were playing Matt Colville's Delian Tomb one-shot. There's a room in there where you're fighting goblins, and there are some tables, and most important to this story, a couple braziers, one of which was being used as a toilet by the goblins. So this player's Leonin character it was in the middle of the room, surrounded by the goblins. He wanted to jump up on the toilet brazier and swing his axe in a great circle to hit as many gobos as he could with one attack. Very cinematic. All of us at the table thought this would be great. The problem is, jumping onto the brazier takes a dexterity-based check, which he succeeded on. Then, going around in a circle on this very poop-filled and somewhat wide brazier while swinging an axe was another dexterity check, and this time he failed. This led to some absolute hilarity. The Leonin stumbled as the brazier tipped. He kept his axe but fell right into that goblin excrement, and for the rest of the session the Leonin was referred to as the shitty kitty. Mostly by me. The player of the Leonin thought that it was hilarious. They loved it, but they did get sick of being called the shitty kitty. Cinematic action should have cinematic levels of successes or failures, but the failures should be fun and not overly punishing. And of course, there are successes. I had another game in the Caves of Chaos where a very strong character picked up an entire table and swung it around. They weren't standing on a brazier, so all I had them do was an athletics check. And that swing around took out a good number of orcs, and it was great. Whether or not the characters succeed or fail, whether or not the characters succeed or fail, they deserve rewards. However, failure should still come with some repercussions or something of one sort or another, just not too punishing. Now here are some options for you for rewards. Inspiration. Advantage for lower level characters, double advantage for higher, or double damage on a hit. An automatic success on a saving throw. And luck points, which, look them up, they're from Tales of the Valiant, and they're awesome. You'll give these out whether the player succeeds or fails. More on that in a bit. While you're here, why don't you go ahead and hit the thumbs up button, subscribe while you're at it, and click the bell icon and set it to always. It only takes a couple of seconds, and it helps me out tremendously. Thank you. I appreciate it. Right, now failure may be things like winding up prone after being spun around or something. Falling prone was essentially what happened to Shitty Kitty. Maybe the PC's weapon gets stuck in a chink in the wall and they lose their bonus action getting it out, but they can still use their main action for that round. For an additional bit of fun, you might only describe the bullet point version of what happens and then have the player actually give the description of it. Now, I haven't done this next one yet, but I plan to try it out for cinematic action using degrees of failure. Something like, if the player misses by only a few points on a dex check, maybe the PC is just off balance instead of falling prone. Now they only have a -2 penalty on the next hit roll instead of disadvantage. Now, I'm going to emphasize this point again. Be clear that there are great rewards, not just for success, but even when failing. Bringing humor to the table is a great effect of failing, but also reward them with luck points or inspiration or something. I have failed to reward properly for failures in the past, and I've paid for it by no one taking risks and describing cool stuff. Don't make my mistake. Now, no matter what rewards you give, there will still be some players who will feel that having skill checks at all is punishing players for being creative. I lost a player once because they loved doing cool things, but without the risk of failure. What can I say? They weren't a fit for the table. It happens. One thing I'll try in the future is to emphasize that if the PC does cool stuff, but stuff that doesn't require a skill check, or if I overlooked it, the only reward would maybe be a luck point. To get full advantage of this bit of homebrew, they need to understand that the greater risk comes with the greater reward. Well, tell me about your rules of cool in the comments, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe. if you haven't already. Great to have you here. May all your games be full of glory.